The Arkady Petrov Fund is introducing the documentary of 2006. In different times and periods, in periods of most apparent and obviously not repeatable booming upswing, but also in periods of decline and dissolution of the cultures on the planet, some people stood up who brought renewal and new knowledge into the world. This knowledge and ideas were often initially considered pointless and absurd by their contemporaries, but like a beam which interfuses the dense layers of the ocean, they dispersed the darkness of outdated notions of the world. However, the drama of such a situation is that the true bearers of the news are constantly exposed to an often cruel and relentless persecution and public incitement. This film is a vote to defend the man who wants to give people new knowledge about the structure of the universe, but was exposed to calumny and denunciation, and later taken to jail. His name is Grigori Petrovich Grabovoi. The Thorny Path of Grigori Grabovoi.
В 1974 году я познакомился с замечательной женщиной, Варварой Михайловной Ивановой. Боюсь, что она уже не среди нас.
In 1974, I met a remarkable woman, Varvara Mikhailovna Ivanova. I'm concerned that she is no longer among the living. She appeared with illegal lectures on Philippine healers in Moscow back then. She also had special abilities herself. In a state of a semi-trance, one could get interesting answers, if the questions were interesting. In one of these seances, I asked, Varvara Mikhailovna, tell us, please, will there be in our country, the Soviet Union, a teacher, whom we will call historic teacher, in capital letters? And then there was her answer, 1974. There's a boy. He was born in Central Asia. He's still learning now, but then he will come to Moscow and teach others. Grigori Petrovich was 11 years old at that time. Already in his early childhood, he discovered his special skills. His gift to see events that were still to happen put people around him in pure amazement. Grigori graduated from university, specializing in applied mathematics. He had a clear nature and capabilities for scientific work, but even more so, his gift as a clairvoyant called for implementation. Soon the flight department of one of the largest airlines of Uzbekistan got interested in the skills of this young man. At that time, the general crisis of the post-Soviet republics already started to emerge, coupled with his excessive wear on the aircraft. So Grabovoi's skills of analyzing the technical condition of an aircraft using the method of clairvoyance came just right. It soon became clear that he was proving to be a very real, practical help. Pilots, aircraft technicians, engineers. Those are technical people with real thinking, only to believe in what they see. They quickly became aware that Grabovoi detected exactly the defects of the components, connections and aggregates.
2 декабря 1996 года показал Грабовому Григорию Петровичу.
On December 2nd, 1996, I showed Grigori Grabovoi the plane Tu-160 with the jet engine Borlak. Grigori Petrovich's attention immediately turned to the weakness of the tail fin, the insufficient stability of the tail fin. And that was right, because with this aircraft, in the process of test flights, the destruction of the end pieces of the stabilizer and the stabilizer fin had occurred. Excerpt from a technical report. Engineer Grabovoi performed the forecasting of the defects and failures of this aircraft, IL-162, board number 86679. Details of the report. Defective flight equipment and failure of undercarriage. After inspection, the named damages were identified and removed. And there are many such documents, a few dozen. Behind the sober lines of the document are accidents not taken place, not happened disasters, hundreds of saved lives, undestroyed destinies, hundreds of family tragedies not taken place. Practical work in the aircraft division made Grabovoi popular. He was called X-ray man, and they began to invite him to diagnose a variety of equipment, machines, buildings, and even space technology. In 1996, there were serious malfunctions located on the American spaceship Atlantis in the orbit. In this extreme situation, Grigori Grabovoi was invited to the control center near Moscow. After analyzing the situation, he found the cause of the damage. The operations carried out according to his instructions were successful. The spacecraft was brought to normal functioning.
Космический корабль удалось перевести в нормальный рабочий режим.
I think that the position on Earth of the people should express in the overcoming of any disaster, even more so since there are more than enough problems on the planet, environmental, for example, nuclear problems, and the primary here in my work is the rescue of mankind. Concerning Grabovoi's ability to predict possible accidents, there are already concrete results from his forecasts. Passengers of the Moscow metro line Krasnoprensky were convinced of the truth of his warning, by own experience on Sunday evening. Workers found serious defects in the trackbed at the places mentioned by the clairvoyant. Everyone should be able to rescue. And if the person who is working in a nuclear plant is able to diagnose the block, you can save them all. And thus, the basis of my belief is the transfer, or say, the finding, the interpretation of such knowledge that can be passed and rescued in reality. Among the events predicted by Grabovoi, an accident at the nuclear power plant in Bulgaria, Kostolyevsky, had been predicted and prevented. The tragic events of September 11, 2001 in the United States were predicted half a year before they happened, just as the prediction of the terrorist act in Nalchik in 2005 and a number of other incidents. Grabovoi became increasingly aware that he could also help people as a healer. His travels to various cities, as well as his practical work in Moscow, as a result, had the healing of the most serious diseases of many dozens of people. In 1995, a boy of 10, for whom a traditional medical aid had obviously not been possible anymore, was healed from sarcoma of the jawbone. I think the best confirmation of everything that has happened and how Grigori Petrovich Grabovoi has snatched our son, who's now alive and well, away from death, is he himself, an A student, the best student and an absolutely healthy person in every respect. Grigori Grabovoi healed me from AIDS in the final stage. Liberation of this young woman from the plague of modern times, AIDS, seemed unlikely, impossible. After the confirmation of a correspondence course conducted by Grabovoi for restoration and after checking out from the Republic Center for AIDS and Clinical Immunology of the Ministry of Health of Georgia on December 21, 1995, I was told that I'm virtually healthy and, in fact, there are no changes on the skin and the analysis of the immune complex is within the norm. I was told, it was on March 29, that I was in the 4th grade of cancer, 4th degree, that's almost the end. There remains very little to live. I refused surgery and his treatment began, and how he treated me. There were control hours from 10 to 11 p.m. Every minute I was thinking that this is my chance, my hope. I will be healthy. I went for investigation and already got the document which said in the beginning that I'm sick, that is my death sentence, and secondly, that I'm healthy. That was in August. In contrast to some other healers, Grabovoi did not work because of the super income or because of the fame behind it. Only the people who know him well understood that this man was fulfilling a mission from which he cannot depart only one step. He himself formulated the meaning like this. In connection with the fact that we must protect the people against this system of global annihilation, the human technology of rescuing based on the awareness of humanity is the most direct and least dangerous way. The irrational technology, that is, the technology of gathering information by sensors, which means certain prognostic technologies, technologies with the application of a special mathematical device in which the apparatus itself is changing as a function of the events. Also connected with it, in my actual practice, this system has made it possible to prevent potential and specific air disasters, catastrophes at nuclear power stations and so on, or in various industrial facilities, including dangerous changes in the organism of man. All material I'm speaking of does already have a broad practical basis.
Изменения опасные в организме человека. Весь материал, о котором я говорю, он уже имеет достаточно обширную практическую основу.
Надо заметить, что поначалу никто...
It must be said that at first no one has seriously attempted to analyze the phenomenon named G.Grabovoi. They thought he was just a super healer, similar to Kashpirovsky or Chumak. Only a few realized that he has created a special complicated theory of the universe, which is able to provide a sufficient basis for each aspect of his work.
Обывательского восприятия не очень легко воспринять. Почему?
For our small-minded view, this is not so very easy to grasp. Why? You know, the ideas by which we are educated, they have more of a logical character, since there is yes or no, black and white, good or bad. These ideas are like a rule, binary, doubled. According to my ideas, and I will only answer with my words, Grigori Petrovich represents a completely different type of thinking. Listening to his lectures or seminars, it is as if he just connects, well, let's say, with an ocean of knowledge that is structured in a very different way. Knowledge based on continuous functions, continuous imaginations, and on forms that have a completely different nature. I would say a different physical nature. And what can Grigori Petrovich do? In full flight, he formulates in words the stream of information that reaches him, and not always the literal wording is easy to understand.
Поток информации, который ему через него поступает, и он формулирует словесно. Не всегда словесные формулировки легки для восприятия.
Мы хотим обратить внимание на то, что эти технологии возникли...
We want to focus on the fact that these technologies have not just occurred by chance, and not only Grabovoi uses them. In recent years, a few centers appeared that use methods of correction of the health of people who are similar in their specification. We are starting to see cell images. We begin to see chromosomes. And there is this process. If you enter into it consciously, it shows that it is subject to certain controls, that consciousness is not just an uninvolved observer of the process, but an operator that can change the course of events. For example, chromosomes have a particular structure. Since there are chromosomal tapes in the genes contained in a particular cartridge, it turns out you can pull the tape from this cartridge to alter the recorded information. For example, we see that there's a missing organ, let's say a missing kidney. Then, through your awareness, you can change that information of the absence of this organ and re-record to the tape that the organ is restored, and put the recorded tape back in this cartridge.
И опять вдвинуть в этот бенд.
Аркадий Петров и Игорь Арепьев
Arkady Petrov and Igor Arapiev created their schools where technologies similar to Grabovoi's technologies are applied. Therefore, one may not just look at the amazing and not at all isolated cases of healing from the most serious diseases as accidental. Two women from Nizhny Novgorod a few years ago were on the border between life and death. For both, oncological diseases had been diagnosed. In November, the diagnosis of a malignant formation in my rectum was confirmed. My diagnosis, ganglion fibromatosis, which had begun to grow. I had been prescribed a hormone treatment. I have taken various types of hormonal agents, and I started bleeding.
Отчаявшись получить реальную помощь,
Desperate to get real help in the facilities of the Ministry of Health, they turned to the center of Arkady Petrov. Here they were guided towards working with their consciousness, and that's where their recovery began.
исцеление.
Spheres have been made, certain information given in these spheres. Mentally, you direct it to the real organ, imagining your organ in the sphere, illuminating it with silvery light. I had understood that I had to change. If I want to solve my problem, I must change. And when I had understood this, I began to change, to the circumstances, to simple everyday and other situations. And I must say, the world opened up to me. I opened up and it opened up to me. And here I already got a result, a completely positive one, which meant the malignant formations in the body had all disappeared.
Таких случаев в практике центров Гробового и Петрова достаточно много.
And there are such cases in the practice of the centers of Grabovoi and Petrov. And the reasons for these, in fact, sensational and significant results, which are not yet recognized in society, lie in the new approach to people, putting a key role to the individual mental and spiritual work. I believe everyone can do this. For the task of saving all of us, one must realize, that is, realizing the general system of harmonious development of the universe. That's why all people who gain this knowledge at such a realization all do the same, according to the master plan of the Creator. Not really exactly the same, but very similar. Saving, regenerating, working on an intellectual basis out from the soul, originally created by the Creator. Then no technique, no technological development will be dangerous for the world, because then man will control technology, distant. The successful development of new technologies causes in people associated with traditional medicine, the Orthodox Church and schools of psychology, emotions and even active resistance. Like the ideologists of the Soviet period who produced the human type or the communist tomorrow, the modern ideologists try to generate the type of right person who corresponds to a particular stereotype, and those people who go their individual spiritual path are called zombies or victims of cults or sects. Let's build an opinion with more attention from the students of Grabovoi, listening to their words.
Другую книгу возьму. И я взяла унифицированную систему знаний и открыла именно на той страничке.
Sometime in March 2003, in the evening at 10 p.m., before me lay open books. Once I took one book, once the other. I took the book Integrative System of Knowledge. I opened it on the page where there was written how to restore the left kidney, and through which concentration. I read it and immediately start directing my focus on the index finger. And since then I see that, like on a screen, Grigori Petrovich starts talking to me from the tip of my fingernail, just like in a movie scene. He was like alive, that is, energy waves were coming from this point. At first I was terrified, glitches, I thought, but then interest awakened. I understood quite clearly that in my heart, in my body, there were feelings of a kind of a slowdown, or better, a concentration, a deep concentration. I felt my body, but as if I was not there. I had a feeling as if the whole world would be within me. I saw the whole world, something very, very own this feeling. As they say, come a blessing. A special happiness was over me. That's what this feeling was. My whole life I've been looking for the answer to one question. Why did the human being come to Earth, and what mission does mankind carry within? Just this question led me to the teachings of Grabovoi. They brought me a book of Grigori Petrovich Grabovoi. Eagerly I began to read it and found that this was exactly what I needed. I started to understand it. Do you understand? If the control acts in the plan of creation and harmony, then it will take place. This means that we control the reality. And in the exact same way we control the restoration of our health. If we have done it unconscious previously, then we do it consciously using the method of Grigori Grabovoi, so the pace increases. We have examples from life. A man is sick for more than 20 years, cannot get up. If you tell him, we will help you, and he answers, no, I go to church. For 20 years he goes to church, still can't get up and is still ill. But here, this is what works faster. These are facts, these are results. This takes place consciously.
Если бы технологии Гробового не работали, ко всем его лекциям, кассетам, можно было относиться несерьезно.
If the technologies of Grabovoi would not work, you could take all his lectures and tapes easy. But the facts speak for themselves. And now we need to go to a disturbing but entirely traditional theme. On the subject of the persecution of the supporters of the new by conservative majority. This has happened many times in the course of history. Why? There's a reason to believe that the ability to recognize different planes of being was originally placed in every human being by the Creator. However, for the majority of them, they are not developed, and only the chosen can receive them in the active state. Such people were called consecrated people due to their age. However, the mass consciousness, created on a particular set of stereotypes, has taken the cause of spiritual comrades rather hard over the centuries. Not infrequently, the most self-sacrificing were pursued and chased. Also, in the case of G.Grabovoi, we could observe the appearance of the same phenomenon. Okay.
В 1995 году Григорий Гробовой едет в Болгарию.
In 1995, Grigori Grabovoi traveled to Bulgaria, to the most famous clairvoyant of our time, Vanga. At that time, she was already very ill and received almost no one. Nevertheless, an exception was made for Grabovoi. Vanga knew before whom she would meet and for what reason. In conversation with him, she predicted that he provides great benefits for the people and that he will be known throughout the whole world. Later, unreliable television journalists distorted the truth about this meeting. In a series of films and television programs, it was said that Vanga had exposed Grabovoi as a charlatan. As a refutation of this lie, we bring the message of the Bulgarian director and documentary filmmaker G.Grabovoi, who recorded this meeting for their film about Vanga.
Я была удивлена. Комментарий был совсем другой. То есть они не перевели мой комментарий, а прокомментировали, что Ванга выгнала Грабового. Это неправда.
I was shocked. That was a totally different comment. That is, they did not translate my comment. They said that Vanga had thrown out Grabovoi. That is simply not true. Our conversation with Vanga started when she said, "You can do a lot, and you must do this in Russia. You shall help the people and not look to the West. Not to Germany, not to America, nowhere. You need to do this in Russia."
Никуда. Ты должен это делать в России.
Особенно резкую волну раздражения со стороны...
A particularly violent wave of agitation from the conservative social circles was caused by Grigori Grabovoi through the discussions on the real possibility of the revival of deceased and the prospect of life without death, as if he had been the first in the history of humanity who have spoken about it. In a series of theogonies, especially the Eastern, the thesis about the possibility of a longer stay of the soul in the physical body on their return to that body after the transition to other worlds was one of the fundamental theses. At the end of the 19th century, Russian philosopher Nikolai Fedorov developed a whole philosophy in which the cornerstones are the teaching of the resurrection of fathers by sons. Lately, scientists are approaching the topics of revival and immortality more and more. From them, we can take the work of our compatriot Vachit Valitov. Valitov explained that in equivalent reversible processes, time can transform into matter and energy and then can also go through the reverse process. If so, then, in the opinion of Valitov, the revival of the dead, which all the holy books point to, is quite possible. Before Grigori Grabovoi, resurrection and immortality were spoken of as something improbable. In any case, something that will be possible only in a distant future. Death was always assumed to be an absolutely inevitable part of life. Grigori Grabovoi was the first to speak of death as not being a natural occurrence. The Creator is eternal, and He only creates the eternal. This means that the Creator creates everything in perfect creation. The issue is that He created us to be free, just as He is Himself. And then everyone has the right to choose, either to study this knowledge and become creative or not. That means that the issue lies in the personal choice of each and every one. If such is done, then life will be eternal. And if we all determine such a status of consciousness, we all will be eternal.
Скрытое раздражение ортодоксальных клерикалов, а также части властных структур, вызвало к жизни
The hidden arousal of the Orthodox clerics, as well as parts of the structures of power, have produced one of the meanest, most treacherous newspaper canards, set in motion by the newspaper Izvestia and taken up by the mass media. The information was that Grabovoi had promised to revive the dead children of Beslan by October 15, 2005. Grabovoi was accused of blasphemy and that he wanted to enrich himself using the tragedy. What really happened? Did Grigori Grabovoi or one of his students go to Beslan? I interviewed almost all women and men of Beslan. No one had talked to anyone, no one had come. There was no one in Beslan that had offered any services in connection with revival, as they called it, or had said anything at all about the doctrine of Grigori Petrovich Grabovoi. Only some journalists came, asked questions, and suddenly this show was made up. We had to realize for ourselves, if so, they have declared war on Grigori Petrovich. We will listen to no one, only to our hearts, our souls. Annette and I have decided for the time being, we will not drive there. We'll meet, we will not speak, will not ask questions. We will not draw any conclusions, and we will not talk about it with anyone. Shortly after the death of our children, I also told this to all of the journalists, I dreamt of my son. All the women in Beslan have been dreaming of the children, and they all said, Mama, I shall return. That has never occurred before. I asked Rita, the other woman. I have asked all those whose parents or children have died. I asked, were you ever in such a state? They all said no. Do you understand? But nobody can deny that this can be possible. We live on. We will wait and see.
Я спрашивала, у вас когда-то было такое состояние? Они все в один голос говорили нет. Все говорят нет. Ну, понимаете? Но никто не может отрицать вот того, что вот что-то может быть. Ну, не надо, давайте поживем. Давайте поживем и дождемся.
Нечистоплотные журналисты, имевшие целью оклеветать Grabovoi.
The mendacious journalists wanted to denigrate Grabovoi, who had spoken about the possibility of his participation in the presidential election of 2008. Unapologetically, they twisted the facts and linked the date to the tragedy of Beslan, without it having any connection to it. We met with Grigori Grabovoi in September, and in the mass media was the date, October 15th. But October 15th had been called the date of the monthly forecasts by Grigori Grabovoi. People are getting together, clairvoyants, forecasters, who work with Grigori Petrovich. In some critical situations that may occur in the country or the region, he gave a forecast for the month. We have already written many times, have given interviews. We got to know the doctrine of Grigori Grabovoi by accident. In November, we received a book in Odessa. It's called Resurrection of People and Eternal Life. From Now On, Our Reality. This scientific work reached us. We studied it, and our mind noticed that this is bordering on fantasy, but our soul and heart did not. We decided that this is a work that deserves to be studied, at least concerning our children. Reawakening, it's a question of faith. The doctrine of Grigori Grabovoi is founded on the Bible. In the Bible, in all religious denominations, resurrection is spoken of, and in the soul of every human being there is this belief in resurrection, especially in the situation we live in. We have now also started to read the Bible to study the work of Grigori Petrovich Grabovoi. And, you know, the soul picks it up, and the awareness picks it up. If all things were created by God, then so is the soul that goes to God, and God creates around it a physical body. For this we only need time. And as Grigori Petrovich says, the time has come when that will be.
Которая уходит к Богу, и все создано Богом, и Бог создает вокруг души физическое тело, и для этого нужно только время. И то, как говорит Григорий Петрович, что не было такого, в нашу эпоху этого не было, никогда этого не было. Но сейчас пришло то время, когда это будет.
Однако и после всей этой клеветнической кампании по поводу...
Even after this campaign of slander in connection with Beslan, the agitation against Grabovoi has not stopped. There were widespread rumors that he takes 39,100 rubles for a reception. He would have promised people the early revival of their relatives. Dirty insinuations were made about the private life of Grabovoi. On Russian NTV, an exalted lady was shown who modestly called herself ruler of the universe. She was said to be Grabovoi's wife. The wife of Grigori Petrovich, Elena Borisovna, who raises 3 children under difficult conditions, should watch this vile campaign. Soon the enemies of Grabovoi designed a provocation with the aim to find a reason for his arrest. Vorzobin, a journalist of the Komsomolskaya Pravda, became the leader of this operation. He came to Grabovoi with an identikit that was built in the editor's office and proposed him to rekindle a man who never existed in reality. Grabovoi allegedly promised to do so. On this basis, he was accused of fraud, and as a coercive measure, the arrest followed.
У Григория Петровича Грабового есть работа. Воскрешение по обобщенному образу.
Grabovoi has a task, revival in general, which means he holds lectures about it. And Vorzobin had registered for a course lecture, that is, he came, paid money for this lecture and listened. Of course, he heard what Grabovoi told him. He then showed him the identikit and said, somehow this man is alive. And later on claimed, Grigori Petrovich, now in the words of Vorzobin, I do not know what really happened, says that this man is alive. I would like to say that this does not surprise me. Why? Man can reach a certain state when, in his eyes, everything starts to revive already. This is why this situation, even when I speak in the words of Vorzobin, does not shock me at all, even if it had been that way, because it's natural. It is the natural continuation of what Juna, the Russian wonder healer, has already done, of what we have done, of what he has done alone earlier than any of us.
Естественно, потому что это естественное продолжение того, что делала Джуна, того, что делали мы, того, что делал он сам еще раньше всех нас. Давайте определимся, много или мало, ведь он же спас тысячи людей.
Do we want to determine whether that means a lot or just a little? For he has rescued thousands of people, which is officially recorded by the medicine. There are documents that there was a diagnosis and the diagnosis was reversed. How much is such work and such knowledge worth? How much does it cost, for example, to save a human from cancer? What does it cost to restore an organ? Let's go to the official medicine. They do not deal with revival, but with transplantology and other things. Attention has been paid to kidney transplantations, and we know that these procedures cost a minimum of $30,000 or even $500,000.
А максимально там до $500 000.
Что же касается баснословных гонораров, которые якобы получал Григорий Грабовой.
As for the fabulous fees that Grigori Petrovich allegedly received, the opponents slander, since he himself never had any financial relations with the client. The trade structure that, as it turns out now, has often used his name for selfish goals, dealt with it. The real income of Grigori Grabovoi was everything but big.
Поскольку НО – это некоммерческая организация, фонд Григория Грабового не имел права осуществлять никакие финансовые операции.
Because this is not a commercial organization, the fund Grigori Grabovoi was not entitled to carry out financial operations, but has performed financial operations, Walker Voyager, that Alexei Kalashnikov had led. He was in charge of literature, video materials, with the enrollment and management of the seminars and the prices of this organization. Grigori Petrovich Grabovoi should, according to contract, get a wage of 8,000 rubles from this organization, which had gained him as a performer. But he did never pick it up from there, because his main income came from the diagnosis of the technology, the aircrafts, and what else he did at that time. Even the seminars of Grigori Petrovich Grabovoi were given free of charge to some. Not just once, he said, come free of charges, come without a registration if you do not want to take a videotape home, because they were expensive at that time.
История с преследованием Григория Грабового показывает, что для общества, в котором мы живем,
The history of the persecution of Grigori Grabovoi shows that for the society in which we live, the norm for all things is related to the general behavior towards the simple people as well as the outstanding people, who brought invaluable benefit to all of humanity. Everything is determined by the interests of the powerful people and/or the power of financial groups. That is the misery of our society, the sign of a serious disease. But it only takes another time to remind people of what affects all in the civilization. The planet itself as a living cosmic body. Everything is toppled in the universal crisis. The ecological state of the biosphere is approaching the fatal line behind which mass epidemics can come to us, behind which destruction of millions of people is threatening, behind which man-made disasters worsen the situation. Against this background, the so-called financial elite of the world continues to divide up spheres of influence without taking into account anything else than their own geopolitical profits. The voice of the growing group who possesses the knowledge on the laws of the cosmos, who understand the meaning of the tasks which mankind has to face, is becoming clearer. The new philosophy based on the comprehensive view of the universe created by the Creator prepares as a single rational, targeted, developing organism on its way to people's consciousness. And this process cannot be stopped by any provocations, lies, or violence.